Hi everyone! Welcome to the continuation of our lesson to the literature under the New Republic. I am Janet Denise Domingo, the discussant, and today, three literatures will be discussed. After discussing Maiden Eve, a short story made by Nick Joaquin, we will move on to another literature entitled Without Seeing the Dawn. So for our objectives, at the end of the lesson, the students are expected to 1. Discuss the story according to its elements. 2. Narrate the important events in the story through photographs. 3. Determine the flashback element in the story. Without Seeing the Dawn was written by Stephen Javellana. Javellana was born in 1918 in Iloilo. He fought as a guerrilla during the Japanese invasion of the Philippines. After World War II, he graduated from the University of the Philippines College of Law in 1948. He stayed in the United States afterwards, but he died in the Visayas in 1977 at the age of 59. Javellana was the author of a best-selling war novel in the United States and Manila, Without Seeing the Dawn, published by Little Brown and Company in Boston in 1947. His short stories were published in the Manila Times Magazine in the 1950s, among which are Two Tickets to Manila, The Scene of Father Anselmo, Sleeping Tablets, The Fifth Man, The Tree of Peace and Transition. Without Seeing the Dawn, also known as The Lost Ones, is his only novel. The title of Stephen Javellana's only novel in English, Without Seeing the Dawn, was derived from one of Jose Rizal's character in the Spanish language novel Noli Me Tangere or Touch Me Not. Javellana's 368-page book has two parts, namely Day and Night. The first part, Day, narrates the story of a pre-war barrio and its people in the Panay Island, particularly in Iloilo. The second part, Night, begins with the start of World War II in both the US and the Philippines, and retells the story of the resistance movement against the occupying Japanese military forces of the barrio people, first seen in Day. It narrates the people's grim experiences during the war. The novel, Without Seeing the Dawn, became the culmination of Javellana's short story writing career. First published in 1947, Javellana's novel sold over 125,000 copies in the US and was reprinted in paperback in edition in Manila by Alemar's Phonics in 1976. The same novel was made into a film by the Filipino filmmaker and director Lino Broca under the title Santiago, which starred the Filipino actor and former presidential candidate Fernando Poe Jr. and the Filipino actress Hilda Coronel. It was also made into a miniseries film for Philippine television. The published novel received praises from the New York Times, New York Sun, and Chicago Sun. Now let us move to the summary. The novel Without Seeing the Dawn, first published in 1947, is set in a small farming village called Manhayang, Santa Barbara, somewhere in Negros. Like most rural barangays, the hardworking and closely knit village folk there had simple needs, simple wants, and simple dreams. They were living their own simple lives when the violence of war reached their place and brought death to their village, their homes, and their hearts. Here revolves the story of Juan Ricardo Suerte, also called Carding, son of Juan Suerte, an industrious, strong, and sometimes quick-tempered young man. He aspired to marry sweet Lucia, the daughter of the Teniente del Barrio. Though his father thought he was not yet prepared and had wished to send him to school, he gave his blessing to the decision of his son. He consented to asking Lucia's hand from her parents, in the traditional pamamanhikan, accompanied by the village's best orator and the godmother of the lass. After agreeing to the conditions of the village chief, the marriage was set. Tatay Juan gathered up almost all of his hard-earned savings for the dowry and expenses for the wedding feasts. Meantime, Carding excitedly built their house despite the advice of the elderly that building one's house in May will bring misfortune to its inhabitants. And so, it came to pass that after the grand wedding and the feast that followed, which was even attended by the representante, the newlyweds lived happily on the land entrusted to Tatay Juan by Don Diego, but not ever after. Misfortune struck early when their first child was stillborn. A more difficult trial came when Lusing disagreed herself, her family, and her husband by the temptation of a house guest, Luis, the son of their landlord. Caught naked, he was beaten up by the strong, angry husband, whose honor and pride were hurt. The couple patched things up, but the land that Carding and Juan Suerte had been tilling for a very long time was given to another tenant. With no land to till, the pair tried their luck in the city. There, in Iloilo, Carding met Rosing and Nestong. The latter was his fellow stevedore and union member, and the former, a prostitute, besotted with him, and also the reason why his wife left him and returned to their barrio. Soon, Carding followed Lusing with news that the representante entrusted them with land to till in Badlan. Lusing, too, had news for her husband. She was again pregnant. They moved to Badlan and worked harder than ever. They were blessed not only by a promise of a bountiful harvest, but also with a healthy son they named Crisostomo. Sadly, their landlord sold the land, and they were given time to harvest what they sowed. Misfortune was like a shadow, though. A great flood destroyed everything that they had harvested, and Carabao as well. Wanting to own their own piece of land, they were convinced to move to Mindanao. But Carding was drafted for military service. When he returned, he was delighted to find his wife heavy with another child. Misfortune welcomed him again, as he was told that Tatay Juan and Crisostomo died of some illness. Little did he know that the Japanese soldiers who attacked their village killed his father and son, and raped his wife. When he found out the truth, he became like a fearsome madman that even his wife and mother-in-law thought him to be bad. As his neighbors, relatives, and friends in Barrio Manhayang were tortured, raped, and massacred by the Japanese soldiers, Carding too became a seemingly heartless executioner to his enemies, and not even his friend nor the brother of his mother-in-law were spared. He also almost killed the child that his wife had just delivered, were it not born dead. For that, Lusing was so enraged that she sent him away and wished him dead. The Japanese ordered everyone to enter a collective barrio or else be considered guerrilla supporters and be shot. But the villagers of Manhayang also refused to be considered enemies of their own sons, and so they decided to evacuate in barrios farther away. However, Lusing was hesitant to go. She was waiting to see her husband, despite everything, knowing that he will be leading the suicide attack to the Japanese garrison. When they did see each other, Carding asked for her forgiveness and left her with cash he had as he bade her farewell. In the end, Lusing refused to flee, for she knew that she was still his wife, duty-bound to receive the corpse of her beloved husband. Moving on to the set of characters in the story, Ricardo Suerte, or Carding. An industrious, strong, and sometimes quick-tempered young man, the son of Juan Suerte, who helps his father to plow the land. Lusing, the beautiful daughter of Teniente Paul. She holds the beauty title as Miss Barangay Fiesta and Carding's sweetheart. Teniente Paul, the barangay chief of Manhayang. It was a kind of a tragic story. And as for the themes, it shows the Filipinos' resistance and movements against the Japanese while they occupied the Philippines, how the Filipinos lived before and during the invasion of the Japanese. The Filipinos' resistance for love, justice, and freedom. These three are the significant themes in the story. The point of view, the story is narrated in third person. The symbolisms are day, talking about a time of peace, happiness; night, talking about a time of war, terror, chaos; dawn, new beginning, hope, and freedom; cow, wedding is prepared grandiosely; Gun symbolizes revenge and war. Genitals for manhood and identity. Pair of shoes. Carding's loyalty, whom he gives importance. Setting. The story was happened in the suburbs of Iloilo, a barrio named Manhayang in the town of Santa Barbara. It was the place of Manhayang Santa Barbara in Iloilo City. It was during the time of World War II, Japanese invasion, the day of pre-Japanese War, and night of World War II. As for the conflict between Carding and his wife, which is man versus man, also the society in which the army is against and wants to eradicate the people in the village, which is man versus society. And in that note, let me end my discussion for this novel with a quotation, said by Elias in Noli Me Tangere. I die without seeing the dawn brighten over my native land. You who have it to see, welcome it, and forget not those who have fallen during the night. The next literature to be discussed is the poem You Ask Me How Much I Love You, written by Benito Reyes. Our objectives are: the students at the end of the lesson are expected to discuss the poem and its elements, identify the symbolisms used in the poem, and lastly, extract values or morals from the poem. Let us know who Benito F. Reyes is. Benito Reyes was born into abject poverty in Manila, Philippines on March 21, 1914. He was born in the Chinese Year of the Tiger. His father, a band leader, abandoned the family when Benito was very young. His mother, Antera Fernandez, was a well-known Pio folk art healer, commonly known as a death coach, who helped individuals transition through the death process. Antera died when Benito was in his early 20s. As a teenager, Benito Reyes was selected by the Theosophical Society as an important world leader, similar to how they discovered and groomed Jiddu Krishnamurti. Shortly after, Reyes was spiritually adopted by a childless Theosophist couple from Ojai, California, who financed his higher education studies in philosophy and psychology. Continuing on what he learned from his mother, Benito dedicated his career to the understanding of cross-cultural studies of spiritual beliefs and practices related to conscious dying. Before his inauguration as the PLN president, Reyes was a professor at Far Eastern University for 21 years. In 1951 to 1952, he taught at Boston University as the Fulbright Smith-Mont professor, and in 1965, he was a Fulbright Hays philosophy professor at the State University of New York. His scholar in residence Fulbright appointment was granted after he published his breakthrough book, Scientific Evidence of the Existence of the Soul, a finalist in a literary contest founded by James Kidd, a wealthy prospector who was willing to bequeath his entire estate to anyone who could prove there was a visual spirit, a spirit which we could see. Reyes also lectured at Harvard, Brown, and other universities in America and around the world. He published a number of works on philosophy, psychology, and the quest for meaning and purpose of life in his poetry of 1,000 Sonnets for God. He was a member of the International Association of University Presidents, or IAUP, that co-sponsored the World Peace University of Costa Rica. He was also with the Institut de la Vie of France, International Institute of Environment in England, and in the Institute of Religious Psychology of Japan. As a teenager, Benito married his childhood sweetheart, Dominga Lopez, who was of Spanish descent. Together, they had 7 children: Siddhartha, Norhalma, Nor Alcione, Alcormizar, Amita, Adita, and Noemi. He died in his residence in Santa Paula, California on September 8, 1992, when he was 78 years old. Now, before reading the poem, I'd like you to take note and identify symbolisms and learn from the morals it has. You Ask Me How Much I Love You by Benito F. Reyes. You ask me how much I love you, a lovely inquisitive lips. You would want to fathom the ocean and scale the infinity blue sky above us. Shall I count the sands on the seashore? or pick the numberless stars of heaven, like some sweet woodland blossoms? Ask then the bald eagle of the air, if he could soar the ends of the distance, or the worm of the ground if it could crawl down to the very core of earth. And you ask me how much I love you? Oh, lovely inquisitive lips, you would want to fathom the ocean and scale the infinity blue sky above us. Read the answer in my eyes, and in the quiverless muteness of my lips. For there are things that are voiceless and would be told only in the silence. And that's it. I hope you figured out the idea of the poem you asked me how much I love you. And for the last literature we will be discussing, it is entitled The Scent of Apples by Bienvenido N. Santos. Our objectives. At the end of the lesson, the students are expected to: number 1, demonstrate ability to grasp fully the author's ideas, including supplementary meanings. Number 2, discuss the story using the elements of short story. Number 3, compare and contrast Philippines from America through different aspects. Number 4, form a semantic map for the word Filipino. Number 5, appreciate the value of nationalism. And last, number 6, realize the importance of preserving Filipino traits. The Scent of Apples by Bienvenido N. Santos. Santos was a Filipino-American fiction, poetry, and non-fiction writer. He was born and raised in Tondo, Manila. His family roots are originally from Lubao, Pampanga, Philippines. He lived in the United States for many years, where he is widely credited as a pioneering Asian American writer. He was born on March 22, 1911 in Tondo, Manila. He is a Filipino-American novelist, short story writer, and poet. He wrote the story of Scent of Apples during the World War II in 1979. Santos' works of short fiction, among which are well-known stories that depict the Filipino condition in America. And he passed away in 1996. For the summary of The Scent of Apples, I would like you to listen carefully. The story Scent of Apples, written by Mr. Santos, is about a man who longing for his native land. This story focuses on the real score of Filipinos who cannot come back to the Philippines because of poverty. It reflects the immigrant character yearning to come back to his land. And when he sees a fellow Filipino, he was very delighted to introduce himself as well as his family to him. It is meant to show that not all Filipinos are lucky to go abroad, and it is indeed possible the lives of Filipinos to be miserable and suffer from poverty even in abroad. One night, Mr. Santos met Celestino Fabia, a farmer. He was surprised to see a man who traveled really long just to make a conversation to him. The man asked in a little incorrect English how the Filipino women of today were different from the stereotype he was familiar with. Then Mr. Santos replied that although they differ in the exterior, both women of different generation bear the heart and soul of a modest Filipina, God-fearing, faithful, and nice. Mr. Fabia talked about his farm to Mr. Santos. His family invited him to his house, where his wife Ruth will be pleased to meet a first-class Filipino. He also told him about his son, named Roger, with pride. On the next day, Mr. Fabia picked him up when they arrived in the farm. The fragrance of apples was spread in the area. He noticed how Ruth's hospitality and gracious was almost Filipino have, and how delightful Roger really was. Each time Fabio smelled the scent of the apples, he always remembered his country, our country that has no apples. He has the feeling of loneliness every day because he smells the scent of the apple every time. He bade farewell to the family, and Mr. Fabia took him back to the hotel. He offered to drop news to his family when he got back to the Philippines, but Mr. Fabia refused, saying that they might have already forgotten him. Thus, the feeling of loneliness, exile, and isolation are the common feelings of immigrant Filipinos. It comes with the fear of no longer belonging to a culture which itself seems at times to be wasting away, and finds expression in the rhythm of arrangement provided by the selections and scent of apples. Setting: the story was called The Scent of Apples because of the overwhelming smell of it in Celestina's farm. We may relate this to the overwhelming new traditions an immigrant must adopt through the course of time. The apples are also a symbolic feature in Celestino's life, as he was only ever be able to truly smell and grow them when he moved to the USA. This happened during the war period in Kalamazoo, Michigan in the USA. The story was set during the time of the first-generation immigrants, or people from various countries who traveled the United States for a better life. The point of view is first person. The whole story is told through what Mr. Santos' perspective, basing it on his actions, thoughts, and feelings, such as how he described the way Celestino smiled or how he immediately smelt the apples. The point of view in The Scent of Apples is that of a Filipino immigrant to the United States who feels trapped between cultures and countries. When lecturing about his country in Michigan during World War II, he is hard-pressed to know how to summarize the differences between his culture and American culture. He meets a fellow Filipino named Celestino Fabia and briefly enjoys a short period of warmth and connection with Fabia's American-born wife and son. However, the narrator then returns to the coldness of the Michigan night, and he again feels a sense of isolation. Moving on to the characters and their roles. Bienvenido Santos, the Filipino young man, the narrative voice in the story, the writer himself, a petit bourgeois expatriate, intellectual constructing with the poor farmer expatriate Celestino. In short, he is the narrator and the writer of the story who went to Kalamazoo, America for a discussion. Celestino Fabia, a Filipino farmer, lived in America, married an American woman. Celestino Fabia is an immigrant from the Philippines, a Filipino farmer who invites Santos home for a meal. He was longs for home, given the emotionally harsh and divisive family matters that compelled his departure. Ruth, an American woman, the wife of Celestino Fabia. She is an American country girl who is willing to work like a slave. Her appearance, roughened by hard labor, displaces the mother and sisters who would have influenced Celestino if he had remained in the Philippines. And last is Roger, the son of Celestino and Ruth. He is the child of Mr. and Mrs. Fabia who goes to school in town. He ate like a little gentleman, exuding niceness and innocence. Conflict is man versus environment. The overall aspects of the story that we may mostly observe as we read through Mr. Santos' point of view is the clash of emotions present in Celestino Fabia's actions and thoughts upon moving to Michigan and having a new family. Two of the most evident parts that show the type of conflict are the scent of apples in Celestino's farm, as which he said were never present in his home, which is in Visayas, and the photograph of the Filipino wearing a traditional costume, which serves as a reminder of the Filipino for each time Celestino sees it. The theme of the story is the loss and isolation that many immigrants can feel. They can be plagued by a continual sense of missing their home country, but they may know that they cannot return, at least not at any point soon. At the same time, elements of the new culture, such as the scent of apples that one can only smell in America, are strange and not necessarily welcoming or familiar. For the symbolism, the apple in the story. The scent of apples in Santos' short story symbolizes the nostalgia that people who are far away from home feel for their homes. At the beginning of the story, Santos writes that the parents of the American soldiers who are fighting far from home wonder, where could he be now? This month when he leaves were turning into gold and the fragrance of gathered apples was in the wind. The smell of apples makes the parents wish for their sons, as apples are an iconic American smell. Fabia, who is from the Philippines, owns an apple orchard, but as the narrator states, there is no such thing in our own country. The house Fabia lives in with his wife Ruth and son Roger also smells like apples, and their back room is filled with them. Even though Fabia has apples in abundance, a kind wife, and a handsome son, the apples are a reminder he is far from home. When the narrator says he hopes he can visit Fabia's town in the Philippines one day soon, Fabia says no one would remember him there now. The smell of apples reminds Fabia that he is in the United States and can't return to his native country, and the smell is therefore a symbol of longing and nostalgia for his homeland. Lastly, for the lesson of the story, would you agree with me that life is a really hard battle? That we have to be strong enough in facing many trials and challenge to be able to win these struggles. A person should be thankful in whatever job they have. Never forget where you came from. Bear in mind that the country you live is the country where you should live. And that is all for today. I hope you learned something from what we have tackled. Thank you everyone. God bless.